Hey, welcome to another off-season bonus episode of Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange alongside Josh Jordan. You can follow Josh on X at JoshJordan975 and read his work daily on sportsmap.com. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe on the channel. We do appreciate it as we ramp up towards the Texans 2024 season. We want you along for the ride with us. We are really excited. We hope you are too. Hit like on this video to show your support for the channel, whether or not you're subscribed. Josh, one of the perks of being relevant is that you're on the tips of everyone's tongue. That's why no one's talking about me, but everyone is talking about the Houston Texans. We've been covering and reacting to some of the media reactions on this channel, kind of reacting to what the talking heads are saying about the Texans and what they're saying about this season and projections and everything else. We've got some video this week from Ross Tucker with Rich Eisen we'll be reacting to a little bit later. First, let's start off with our friend Colin Cowherd. We'll have to see if we can get Colin on the channel. I mean, that might be a big get for us, but maybe if he's willing, I think that'd be a fun conversation to have with him, just because we've been reacting to a lot that he's been saying, and I think that'd be fun to give him a chance to react to some of the things we're saying. But he was talking about the upcoming draft on his show. Now, we know, as we've discussed on this channel, he has predicted the Texans to miss the playoffs this season. So that's why this video caught my eye. Let's hear what Colin has to say about the Texans as it pertains to the draft this year.
Nobody delivers hope like the NFL, the Houston Texans. Bad ownership, bad roster, bad quarterback, bad team, bad stink, no inertia. What did they do? C.J. Stroud with the number 2 pick, moved up to the number 3 pick, got Will Anderson. Both are Rookie of the Year. The Houston Texans win their division, win a playoff game, and now they're tied for the 3rd best odds to get to the Super Bowl in the AFC. They were a laughing stock a year ago to Super Bowl contender.
Super Bowl contender says nobody delivers hope like the Houston Texans. So, Josh, that's not necessarily him walking back his comments per se, but you can't contend for the Super Bowl if you're missing the playoffs. So I do think there may be some groundwork being laid here for him walking that back. You also wrote something interesting on some Colin Cowherd comments for SportsMap. Walk us through what you wrote for that article. Before you do that, give us your thoughts on the clip we just saw from Colin.
Yeah, I think it's something Florio also said, that the NFL must love the Texans' success, because it's proofs in the pudding. In a year and a half, the Texans have turned it around. They were a disaster a year and a half ago, and now they're Super Bowl contenders. And that's what the NFL wants. They want and Colin hit on this too, they want the draft to provide hope and give you meaning and excitement in the fan base that, hey, we can turn things around in 1 year or two. Our first round pick doesn't go into the minor leagues for 4 years before we see him play. Our first round pick with the Texans, despite Dusty Baker's comment about rookie quarterbacks not coming in and starting and changing things, C.J. Stroud came in and did exactly that. He turned it around in 1 year, won a playoff game. So that provides hope. And that's what Colin's talking about with the Texans. The other thing I found very interesting that you alluded to, an article I put on SportsMap, is, Colin had a private interaction with the Texans a couple years ago. And this was something that he just revealed the other day, just this last week. So Cowherd interviewed Kyle Hamilton. He was a safety for Notre Dame. He was coming out in the draft. There were a lot of mocks that had him falling to the Texans. Texans had 2 picks in that first round. They ultimately passed on him. They traded back and he went to the Ravens. But what Colin said was interesting is, after he did an interview with him, the Texans reached out to him privately, and they just wanted, tell us about him. What were your thoughts on him as a person? What was he like when the cameras were off? Just, that sort of thing. Just give us a feel for the guy. And they asked for Colin's interpretation of him as a person, how the interview went. And I thought that was really smart. And I know we've been giving the Texans a lot of credit over the past year for how things changed with hiring D'Amico Ryans, but this was 2 drafts ago. So that means this was Nick Caserio or somebody working on behalf of him reaching out to Cowherd to just get a little more information about the player. And so that tells me it's not just D'Amico. Casario's been doing some really good things too. That's why it's so great now. I think they had that partnership. And then, of course, you add CJ Stroud and Will Anderson to the mix, and that changes everything. But it just shows me that the Texans, what does it hurt to reach out to Cowherd and just be like, hey, you got 5 minutes. We just have a couple questions, for you. This is what smart organizations do. They get all the information. They leave no stone unturned. And I thought that was really great, that this tells me that the Texans are doing things right behind the scenes. And, you kind of made the point. Cowherd's got to feel good about this too. Like, hey, they care about what I think about this player. They want to know what my thoughts were on him. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting that he just brought that up the other day, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah, I think of course, Colin's going to like that because they're coming to him for information. So I think it's ingenious. I think number one, to your point and to his point, because he was very, he was very complimentary of the team and saying like, hey, this is a team that's clearly trying to do their homework, because it takes nothing to lob him a phone call or a text or however they reached out to say, try to get some due diligence behind the scene. But, like you said, it's also really smart to contact a high profile host like him, because it's going to flatter him that they came to him for his opinion. And that could also color his opinion about the team when he's talking about them publicly. And nothing from nothing, it seems to have worked. So I think it's ingenious for a couple different reasons. Now let's shift gears here. Let's jump over to some other comments that were made in the media this week. This time by Ross Tucker on the Rich Eisen show. They were talking about the ripple effects from the Diggs deal. Now, Eisen likes the deal. He likes the way the Texans are going for it, and Tucker does too. But Tucker was talking about some of the ripple effects, kind of the repercussions of the Diggs deal. He made a point that both you and I think is worth talking about, so we wanted to share that on this channel. Let's play that right now.
Yes. I kind of dig what they've done. So, I love that they're all in on Stroud's rookie contract. I wonder about the opposite effect of him being on a 1-year deal and going to be a free agent after this is, what if he's not getting the ball? I know he's motivated, but what if he's not getting the ball that much? What if it's going to Tank Dell? What if it's going to Dalton Schultz? What if it's going to Nico Collins? Does he get frustrated?
I mean, he might be right, because if Diggs is in a contract year and he wants to put up the best numbers possible, because this is probably his last big deal of his career with him being in his 30s now. So I get his point. But when I went and looked at the actual numbers and did a little bit of math here, so Stroud was averaging 274 yards a game. You put that across 17 games, that comes out to a little under 4,700 yards. You got Nico, almost 1,300 yards. Stephon Diggs had a little over 1,100, and Tank had over 700. Lots of other guys, too. I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty, but I added up the running backs' yards, Robert Woods, Noah Brown, all these guys. If they all put those numbers together this year, yes, that will be higher than the passing yards that we project Stroud to have this year. But I don't think that'll be the case. I don't think Noah Brown is getting 567 yards this year. I don't think Robert Woods is getting 426 yards this year. So I think this is going to be a deal where I think Nico and Diggs are going to get the lion's share. And then I think Tank will get his, but how healthy will he be? He had 709 yards last year, only over 11 games. That's where it comes out, right? Like, we don't think they're probably going to have 3 1,000-yard receivers next year with Diggs, Nico, and Tank. But having 2 and somebody else a little under that is certainly possible. I did a little digging. The Bengals in 2021 and 2022, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, they both had over 1,000 yards. The Eagles have done it with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown the past 2 seasons. Now, I looked at the 49ers because we know how we compare them to the Texans. They have not had that happen, but they've dealt with quite a few injuries to Deebo Samuel. And then finally, the other ones, the Dolphins have done it the last 2 years. Another offense very similar to the Texans with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So it can be done. This could be a world where Stephon Diggs goes over 1,000 yards, and so does Nico. They both go into contract years happy, excited. They're playing on a competitive team. So I get what Tucker's saying here, but I think even though there are a lot of mouths to feed, I think everybody could still be pretty happy with their roles.
Yeah, and look, I think his concerns hold water for sure, because Diggs does have a track record of being unhappy on teams, and the Texans run a lot of play action, which means that they're going to be ground and pound a lot. I don't think they're going to, as much as we had hoped that was going to be the case last season, I don't think they're going to go to an aerial exclusive offense. I think they're going to continue to run play action, which means you're going to have to run the ball enough for the defense to honor it, especially if it's working, because it may be a thing where you have so many weapons and in the wide receiving core that it opens things up on the ground. So that could be something in which that takes opportunities for passing yards away. Look, here's what I'd say is, I think, he also talked in that video as well about he didn't like the Texans basically blowing out the last 2 years of Diggs' deal here. And he didn't like that because, that's what he's saying is like, it could be, yes, that he could be motivated to get that next deal, but that could be the seed of what makes him, unhappy because he's looking to chase stats. Here's what I'd say is, I would hope that what Nick Caserio did by buying out or by canceling out those last 2 years, avoiding those last 2 years on the deal, I would hope what that would do is buy good citizenship. Given Diggs' track record, the thing that could hurt him more than a sub 1,000 yard season is having more drama at another team, a team that you just got to. Now, there's no accounting for self-awareness of diva wide receivers in the NFL, but if he understands his situation, this season, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but this season could be the difference between his last lucrative deal or a team just taking a flyer on an aging, problematic player. And especially if the Texans are a good team, it is in Diggs' very best interest to be a good teammate this season.
Oh, 100%. It could kind of be a 3 strikes and you're out deal where, he had issues in Minnesota, he had issues in Buffalo. If he comes to the Texans where DeMeco Ryans runner up for coach of the year, everybody's talking about the type of culture that the Texans have turned around, and with a quarterback like CJ Stroud and complementary pieces like that, and he can't get along there, then yeah, that's going to get a long way to people are going to give him another prove it deal. But I will say this, you look at guys like Antonio Brown and he can go be a bad citizen everywhere. And then you find a quarterback like Tom Brady that vouches for you and they let you come in. But for the most part, they're not giving guys in their 30s with attitude problems like Antonio Brown huge deals like Stephon Diggs is seeking. This is his last big chance at another bag. And he's going to want to get all that. And you're right. It's going to be a blend of how good a teammate are you and what does your production look like? And if he's another problem for CJ Stroud, then yeah, it's not going to work out well for Diggs. I think, we were talking pre-show. Wiping out the end of the contract isn't my big issue with what Nick did, Caserio. I just wish it was for maybe a 3rd round pick instead of a 2nd round pick. That's what that Keenan Allen trade was supposed to be, for a future 3rd. With the 2nd round pick, this is such a great draft for receivers. I know it's next year's pick, but it also gives you that flexibility where maybe you could use that to trade up and get one of these great receivers in the 1st round that you may covet. And then you have that guy for 4 or 5 years on a cheaper rookie contract. But at the same time, I get what Nick's doing. They're going for it all right now. And, you always pointed out a prospect, as highly regarded as they may be, they're not a sure thing. And free agents aren't a sure thing. Things happen when guys switch teams. They don't always have repeated success, but you have a better chance of knowing what the guy looks like in the league than going with the rookie that hasn't proven it. And if they're trying to do this right now before they have to pay CJ Stroud, I get the logic, but I understand there is some risk here. He could have a great year and then just walk. And then you got Nico Collins too. If he has a great year, you probably can't pay both. Maybe that's why Nick's doing it. Whichever one performs really well, you give that guy a contract and move on. But I don't know. I would lean to Nico if it's even close, just for youth. But we'll see. But Ross Tucker brings up a good point. These guys, receivers especially, they're not happy when targets are going the other way. But as I proved in the stats, there's a way where Nico and Stephon can both get their numbers tanked to some extreme too. And everybody will be good. They need to be winning football games. That's a big part of it too.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's every move you make is going to be a risk. even drafting a second rounder, they could, look at what happened with Stingley. You get hurt in your first season. So it's just so hard to project like what the output's going to be, regardless of whether it is a free agent or whether it's a draft pick. And the risk associated with Diggs is we know like how he can perform. We know like what his upside is. It may be, you hope not, but maybe there's a Jose Abreu situation where there's, like regression because of age. I don't think we're going to see that, but there could be regression because of attitude problems. Maybe there's just, a chemistry thing that happens here. You don't know, but I do think, again, I think Nick Caserio was probably smart in right from the onset buying, good cachet, buying good credit with Stephon Diggs here, and maybe voiding out those last 2 years of the deal and saying like, hey brother, go out and earn your bag on the field this season. We're going to give you every opportunity to, with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So hopefully that buys them, some cachet with him, and we'll just see how it works out. I mean, again, like I agree with everything you're saying. I do think, a second rounder is a sporty price to pay. At least they were able to get some late rounders back in return. Yeah. So, and who knows what those turn out to, whether those are turn out to be serviceable players or not. But, it's something. But there's a reason why it's called a shove, and there's a reason why shoving is also a high risk move in poker, which is you're putting all your chips on the table, and sometimes you bust. But the idea is you're going for maximum reward as well, and so we'll have to see how it all plays out. And as we see it play out, and we talk. Oh, go ahead.
I just have one more quick point. Yeah. I thought C.J. Stroud pointing out John Mechie when they were throwing the other day and how he's looking good. And I know it's a long shot, guys. We haven't seen a lot from Mechie with the illness and coming off the ACL, but him and CJ are tight. And, him and Tank are really tight too. And I think it would be great if Mechie comes along and gives you something, a younger player that maybe can play with you a little bit longer and have a bond with CJ. We haven't seen it yet, so I get it. But I'm just pointing out there's a lot of mouths to feed. Noah Brown, they brought him back, and you still have a lot of players. But I think they're telling you we're gonna line up in a lot of 3 wide receiver sets.
Yes.
Where you got your tight end and then you got your back and mixing, to where I think at least more than 50% of the time, I'm thinking there's only going to be 3 receivers on the field. And I think those guys will usually be, Diggs, Nico, and Tank. So hopefully they get the lion's share of those touches for production wise, and it's the best for the team. They're your best playmakers. But it wouldn't surprise me, if we start seeing maybe Mechie does take a step forward. Noah Brown had over 500 yards last year, and we're not factoring injuries either, right? So who knows? Maybe they figure, well, Nico hadn't been able to make it through a season. Tank didn't make it through a season. Diggs has been pretty healthy. Maybe those 2 guys together with Diggs, those are your 2 main focal points of production, and then you sprinkle in your running backs and your tight ends and your Noah Browns of the world and your Mechie. So I just want to bring that up, that maybe don't give up on Mechie yet, because CJ certainly hasn't.
Well, when you say that there are a lot of mouths to feed, that's the one of the things I think of is like at the end of last season, the potential targets for CJ were for hunger. And so like if you have a lot of potential targets for CJ, then that's a good thing. And that's a step in the right direction, because you didn't have that. That's one of those first world problems, and I will definitely take it. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. If you enjoyed the show and you haven't already, please hit like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll talk to you soon. Go Texans.